Everybody all coffeeed up? Ready to hear about the high-speed choo-choo? So as I mentioned yesterday, I was in Shanghai last couple of weeks where they have the most rail miles of high-speed train in the world. They were very proud to tell us about that. And also that they were developing their own trains. And so I'm really anxious to hear what's going on here in Texas because we know they're stumbling their heels a little bit in California with the high-speed rail. And so we're looking to hear about the project here. And we've got a new bio that's been pushed out for Travis. So I get his title here correctly. He's now the Vice President of Stakeholder Engagement. That sounds like a chapter in the back of the PMBOK guide, doesn't it? For the Texas Central. He's a native of Waxahachie, Texas, graduate of Baylor University. He's been working to bring high-speed rail trains to Texas for more than 10 years. A long journey. So we look forward to hearing all about it here this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. All right, you are caffeinated, more so than I am. So thanks for having me this morning. Thanks everyone for being here. If you can't hear me, let me know. Okay, I see you on the back not doing this, so that's a good sign. So I'm going to go through a quick PowerPoint because everyone loves a PowerPoint in the morning. And I'm not real fragile, so if I see any hands pop up in the middle of the presentation, I'm happy to answer questions, but there will be plenty of time at the end for questions as well. So let's get started. My name is Travis Kelly, as Jim said. I'm in the Dallas office for Texas Central, and we are the private company bringing high-speed trains to Texas. We are bringing the Tokaido Shinkansen, which is the fifth generation of the system that's been running in Japan since 1964. We're bringing that to Texas. Why? It's a new way to travel. So currently you have some pretty poor options when you want to get between Dallas and Houston. That is, if you want to get there on time, and you want to get there safely, and you want to get there affordably. The high-speed train travel, what it will do is it'll be safe. In Japan, they operate, they've carried billions and billions of passengers over their 53 plus years, and we're going to bring that same operating culture, that same system, everything that made passenger travel an exact science. We're bringing that to Texas. So it's going to be safe. It's also going to be fast. So you're going to go 186 miles an hour. That sounds pretty fast. It's not as fast as an airplane, but it's incredibly fast. The scenery will go by really quickly. You'll get to your destination as quickly as you need to. That means in Houston and Dallas in less than 90 minutes. And that includes a stop in our Brazos Valley Station, which is about 30 minutes from Texas A&M campus. So that's the requisite whoops there. I'm not an Aggie, but I married one, so I kind of get half credit when I do it in College Station. And it's also going to be reliable. You know, we used to set our watches to the train whistle. When the train would roll into town, radio shows wouldn't start because they wouldn't know it was noon, for example, until the noon train rolled in and blew its whistle. We've completely lost this connection between timely, reliable travel and travel, right? Dependability. And so what train service does is it brings that back. No more high-fiving when you arrive at your destination within 5 minutes of the scheduled time. You think you got away with something. That's not the way travel should be. It should be reliable. It should be dependable. You should leave with the scheduled time and arrive at the scheduled time, do so safely, and give that time back to you so you're not white-knuckling it on I-45 or letting someone else read your email on the airplane. So this is the train. You'll notice it's incredibly quiet. There's also no audio in this video. But don't let that distract you. It's incredibly quiet. In Japan, they operate a 16-car train set that holds about 1,400 people. They have 3x3 seating in coach and 2x2 seating in their first class. They're green cars, as they call them. All of our cars are going to have 2x2 seating or 1x2 seating. So sorry for you middle seat connoisseurs. This is in far east Texas. You'll notice it's powered by an overhead catenary. So it's an electric train, just like dark, much faster and much wider. And much of it built in Texas will look a lot like this, where it's built above ground. Well, it's all above ground, but where it's built on an elevated viaduct where livestock and automobile traffic, pedestrian traffic can go underneath it. About half of it will be built on a viaduct. In Texas, we're going to have an 8-car train set that'll hold about 400 people. We're going to have somewhere between 13 and 15 individual train sets. So we'll be able to do 68 one-way trips a day, so 34 from each of the endpoint stations. That'll be plenty of capacity, and it'll be future-proof for generations of Texans. So for those of you who are new to the state, here's a really simple map of the state of Texas. So how did we get here? Well, you don't just go to Wikipedia and look at the population of North Texas, the population of Houston, and say, well, you know what, let's raise hundreds of millions of dollars and build a high-speed train. You have to look at why these people are traveling, right? It does our folks no good to know that Joe goes to Houston twice a year. Big whoop, no big deal. Why does that? That doesn't matter, right? We have to know why Joe goes to Houston. If Joe is going to catch an Astros game, or I think they have a football team in Houston now. If they're going to go to a football game in Houston. Joe's probably willing to pay one ticket price. If Joe's boss calls him on a Monday night and says, Joe, I need you in Houston 9 a.m. Tuesday morning, Joe's probably willing to pay whatever it takes and not tell the boss no, right? So if Joe's traveling for business, he's got some certain flexibility on price and schedule. If he's traveling for personal, he's got the family in tow, they're going to a museum, going to see family, what have you, there's probably a different level of flexibility on price and schedule. So we need to know why Joe is traveling. So what we've done is over these years, we've spent millions of dollars on different types of ridership studies, on focus groups, and other data to analyze how many people are out there traveling, why they're traveling, where their trips start, where they end, and then what their sensitivity is to cost and schedule, and that determines really what type of service we need to be planning, what type of system we need to deliver to be successful. How do we compete successfully with air and auto? So we know that there are about 16 million trips a year made between North Texas and Houston, and these are trips that if you catch a plane in New Orleans and you connect through Houston and you go on to Oklahoma City, that's a weird way to get to Oklahoma City, but we don't count you because you're probably not going to take the train. If you leave this campus and you drive to Houston, but you stop at every single Buc-ee's, good for you. But we're not going to count you. You're not one of those 16 million. You're probably making deliveries or you have some sort of weird issue with Buc-ee's. It's great, but everyone, really? So these 16 million trips, about 1 million of them are made by air, and the rest of them are made by car. We know we have to design our system to get people out of their cars. Most of our passengers will come out of their cars. A lot of our revenue will come from people who are currently flying. And then there's this unknown that's pretty big of people who aren't traveling right now because it's too much of a hassle, because there's not a good option. I woke up this morning in Fort Worth, I live there, and it took me an hour and a half to get here today. So it took me as long to get from Fort Worth to here, and it was just, okay, it's an hour and a half. That's what Google said it would take, and that's about what it took. It'd be the same distance to go from Dallas to Houston by train. So if you're a salesperson, an attorney, any kind of consultant, you can probably charge 2 hours in an hour and a half. And it's time it's given back to you, and you have access to this whole new customer base, employer base, client base in the other metroplex, the other metro area that you don't currently have, because it's just hard to get there. It's a pain to get there. So how are we getting there? What are we doing? Well, as I mentioned, we're a private company. It's a private project. All the assets are privately owned. We have a board comprised of private individuals most of whom have invested their own personal money or their institution's money in the project. But we do have to have a federal environmental clearance. It's called the National Environmental Policy Act. And that process began in June of 2014. A short 5 years later, we're still in the middle of it because it's a federal process. But in December of 2017, the Federal Road Administration, who was leading this environmental review, released for the first time a single alignment it's called their preferred build alternative. So of all the potential alignments, this is the one that they prefer at this point. And we expect that some minor modifications, that'll be the final line. So that let us really expedite our property acquisition process, some other planning processes that we were able to put in place with some certainty of that alignment. We also announced last year an agreement with Amtrak. There currently is no Amtrak service between Houston and Dallas, unless you want to go through San Antonio and you have 3 days. So I love San Antonio. Go see it, take the train there, but if you need to get between Houston and Dallas for business, or you don't have 3 days to get there, the train isn't an option for you. So we partnered with Amtrak, and what we've committed to do is operate a shuttle service between the Amtrak station in Dallas and our station in Dallas, and the Amtrak station in Houston and our station in Houston. So if, for example, you're taking that same trip from New Orleans to Oklahoma City, or in this case, Oklahoma City, by train, we'll cut down the total travel time by about 2/3, because we'll connect Dallas and Houston by a high-speed train. So that's a benefit to the Amtrak traveler, a benefit to the high-speed train traveler, and it connects those states in ways that haven't been connected before. So that's a partnership we announced last year. We also brought on Bechtel, this little mom and pop shop with 30-some-odd thousand employees, with a lot of experience delivering huge mega projects. We brought them on as our program manager. So they are an extension of the Texas Central staff. They have a couple dozen employees now in the Dallas office, a handful in Houston, and then a handful scattered around the world, contributing by a conference call and flying for meetings as needed. But a really neat thing about bringing Bechtel on, is that there was a group of folks, mostly Americans, who were living in the UK working on passenger rail projects for the last 15, 20 years. And they're now able to come home to America and work on a high-speed train project. They're here in Texas working on a train project, bringing that really relevant, really timely experience to the U.S., having come off a mega project or two in the UK. So we're really fortunate that timing worked out for that. And then we announced also last year that our design build partners, Cellini and Frigillo, an Italian firm, and then Lane Construction, an American firm, are now going to be our design build partners. So they will be actually building the project, and they are supported by their design engineer of record, WSP, another large engineering company. So we have incredible resources involved in the project now. In the addition of Renfe and Adif, who in Spain operate as separate companies, Renfe operating and maintaining the train sets, and Adif maintaining the rail infrastructure. Here they are operating as a single entity, as our operating partner, advising how we right-size all our maintenance facilities. There's a lot of talk about our passenger stations. There will be 3, one in Dallas, one in the Brazos Valley, and one in Houston. But there are 70-some-odd other facilities as well, many of them track maintenance, train maintenance, power substations, signal huts, and so on. And all of those need regular maintenance. And so having the perspective of the train and the infrastructure maintainer and operator in the fold, in the room, as we make these decisions is really critical at this point. And then lastly, some of this you have to pay for. Well, all of it you have to pay for. So we brought on Citigroup, another household name here, and then MUFG, who's part of the Bank of Japan, and they are our financial advisors. So they're not paying for it, but they are helping us shape our plan of finance and shaping our approach with the capital markets. So in addition to the couple hundred folks we have working on the project in Texas, there are a couple dozen in a fancy boardroom somewhere in Manhattan, also mulling over how to pay for the project. A few of the household names here affiliated with the project to date. This slide could be much busier and much bigger. There are a lot of individuals and companies already working on the project. And I was actually the first employee of the company, and so it's been really fun to watch it grow over the last 8+ years and add a lot of these household names and others who are attracted to a project like this that is on the global stage. So a little illustration of how these companies are going to work together and how we at Texas Central are trying to manage them and this process as they come together. The Cellini Lane WSP group will be building everything from the rail down. So all of the viaducts, all the embankments, all those facilities with the exception of the passenger stations, which I'll speak to in a second. Cellini and Lane will be building those. So what they're doing now is putting together a cost and schedule estimate for the project, All the banks know that Travis Kelly has never built a mile of high-speed train, not even a foot of high-speed track. Slaney has built thousands and thousands of kilometers of track in Europe. That's not quite as long if you measure it in miles. It's a small number, it's complicated. But it's a lot, they've built a lot of it all over Europe. And then Lane has built a lot of things in Texas. And so that their partnership together has been really critical. But, so they're putting together the cost estimate and the schedule estimate for the project that we will then take to the banks for financing. The team that you refer to as Team Japan, it's JR Central, who is the operator of the train between Tokyo and Osaka in Japan. They also own the IP for everything from the rails up. They own the IP for the train sets and the signaling and everything else. They lead a group called Team Japan that includes the Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, Toshiba, NEC, and Hitachi watching manufacture the train. So they will be providing everything from the rails up, so all the signaling and the train sets and everything else. Renfe and Adif are not building the passenger stations, but they are the operating partner and will likely be the operator of the train itself. So they will be training the Texans who will drive the trains and operate the trains, maintain the trains in our train maintenance facilities in Dallas County and Harris County. And then at the top is Texas Central, the owner of the project, and then with the extension of Bechtel, managing the overall construction of the project and the delivery of all these assets together. And I mentioned that we do not yet have the constructor of the train stations on board yet. There's an active procurement for those services right now. So we're really excited by the end of this year, really by the fall of this year, we hope to have that team on board that will deliver the 3 passenger stations. We have some exciting renderings that I wish I could share, but I can't. But they're exciting renderings of the 3 stations. It'll be really, really exciting project as it unfolds and develops over this calendar year. So with the exception of the passenger station builder, we have all the partners now needed to deliver the project in the room, in the office, working on all this complicated system and bringing them all together. Altogether, we expect the civil construction to cost in excess of $12 billion, perhaps well in excess of $12 billion. On top of that, you have the cost of the systems, everything that Team Japan is delivering, and then you have, of course, the cost of the financing and everything else, and that will get you to your total project cost. These wages are, I think, a bit dated from the Texas Workforce Commission, but it's sort of just an order of magnitude here. We expect at least 10,000 direct jobs during peak construction, probably 5 or 6 years of peak construction. And these are just direct employees of the railroad. These are and of those design build contractors. These are not the logistics people. You can expect a very healthy multiplier on top of this. The economic impact of construction is going to be significant. And then once we're under operation, the railroad will directly employ 1,500 people approximately. About a quarter of those will be employed somewhere outside of Dallas County and Harris County. So the impact, the economic impact on an ongoing basis in the rural communities in between Harris and Dallas counties will also be significant with well-paying jobs based right there in those rural communities.
Just a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
So the picture of the train.
Yes.
The one that, from a design perspective, is it going to be futuristic or will it have a Texas feel to it? Maybe some longhorns on the side?
So the question was, is the train going to look kind of futuristic, or is it going to have some longhorns on the front or something? So the train will likely be shaped very similar to this. That's, as you can imagine, that shape is not random. It's been designed over years to be aerodynamic and all that. But the color scheme is something that we're working on right now, both interior and exterior. That's something that the Renfe team and our branding teams are going through right now to look at not just the color of the train, but the interior kind of fabrics and more the lighting and those types of things. Anything that's customer facing like that. That's one of the things we're actively working on now, because that's also part of the station design, the inside of the station. Anything that's customer facing. So no longhorns. Something about lightning and I don't know, but it will be a really really sleek, sleek terrain, and it will not be blue and white in all likelihood. So it's really easy to sit here or stand here in a conference room and talk about this really exciting project, and it is a really exciting project, and it is good for Texas. But it involves a lot of land that doesn't belong to us. And that's not something that we shy away from or minimize. It's an important part of the project, and it's something the project has to get right if we're going to be successful. So what we are doing is we have an options purchase program where we go and we meet with landowners and we negotiate with them on an option to purchase their property. And we have a bit more flexibility on how we purchase and what we purchase relative to a city or a state going in to do a similar linear project. If in some cases, if we're going to fundamentally alter the use of that land, say the line is going to run between a farmer's stock tank in the barn or through a home or something, we're able to, in many cases, offer to purchase the entire property if that's easier for the landowner, or we can just purchase what we need. If we're going to purchase just what we need, we often have to get to work with the landowner on what that facility is going to look like after construction. What type of equipment do they need to get back and forth across the line, and those types of things. And so our process is working. We've purchased more than 30% of the parcels that we need all along the entire line, and that includes more than 50% in Grimes County, Waller County, and Madison County. So we're making significant progress, meeting with landowners on a daily basis, either in our office or across the kitchen table or their attorney's office in their home county. So this process is working, and we're excited to be able to continue this work and resolve a lot of these concerns through these one-on-one conversations. And those 30% of the parcels, that varies from a single-family home, a neighborhood, or purchasing not a mile and a half or more of the alignment at once. So it really varies, but it's all a single conversation with the landowner and their family. When it's all done, this is another image of the viaduct section. A lot of it will look a lot like this. And it'll be the largest electric vehicle in the country, really. It's entirely electric, and it is as green as the Texas grid is, and our grid is getting greener and greener, so it's really a good thing for air quality across the state. But it's a great opportunity to reduce carbon emissions as well due to transportation. Yes, sir.
Yeah, right on this one. Hi. Nice biocement system. Is there a calculation of how many cars it will replace? How many journeys it will, car journeys it will replace? Has that ever been run?
It has their estimates, and I don't have it at the top of my mind right now. There was an estimate in the draft environmental impact statement, and it's a correlation between our ridership, the percentage of our ridership that comes out of or off the road, and then there's typically a multiplier that assumes some occupancy of the vehicle, 1.2 people per car, something like that. So I was a liberal arts guy, so I can write you an essay about it. I can't do the quick math. But there is an estimate, and it's significant because we're targeting automobile traffic as our target market. And we think that's what we're going to compete really well with. So the impact should be significant, and which has other knock-on impacts in terms of reducing the anticipated wear and tear on I-45 and things like that. In terms of economic impact, I'm not here passing out flyers to vote for a bond or anything else. This is not a public project, and I'm trying to elicit strong public support for it. I think, I would encourage you to be supportive, and we appreciate it. But we're not here to sell you on the economic impact of it, so you'll vote accordingly. But it is an important part of this project. That the scale of this project is incredible. I can't think of a single larger project in the state of Texas that's been done, especially privately. So the economic impact over a 25-year period will be about $36 billion. And then in all 10 counties, we are required by federal code to maintain certain we have to have plans and procedures in place in case something does go wrong, either to the train or on board the train. And while it has proven to be incredibly safe in Japan, we have to have, policies and procedures in place in case something does go wrong. And when that requires special training or equipment for local first responders, all that happens on our dime. And those resources are obviously in place in those communities 24/7, 365. So the knock-on benefit of that will be a lot of additional training and equipment for mostly the rural volunteer fire departments along the way, and a lot of training as well. And I think it's trying to play here. There we go. So this is a little bit of what this train will make possible, and I apologize there's no sound and they seem to have some health problems. Let me keep going, but there's essentially what this is. It's a video it's on our website. I'd encourage you to check it out, but it's the scene of a woman being called early in the morning. You got to get to Dallas, you got to get to Houston, and she has time to take her kid to daycare or to school and still make it, do a little dance apparently, and then still make it to Dallas in time, where that would not be possible by air or by car, but because it's possible by train, she's able to live where she wants to live and in the community she wants to live and be responsive to her employer's constraints and requirements. It also shows a little bit about how the passenger experience will look on the train. The baristas don't have bodies, just arms. For example, it's real high tech. And I'm not sure why they're dancing this morning. I've never seen that. In terms of security, we get lots of questions about security. We're already working with TSA and DHS and FBI and all the rest of it. But there will not be, sorry, I can't help it, that dancing is just funny. There will not be an airport-style security at train stations. While we do not have high-speed train travel in the U.S. right now, we do put a lot of people through train stations every day, millions of people, and do it safely. So there are global best practices that tell us what works, how to keep passengers safe, how to keep the infrastructure safe, and how to get people through train stations safely and efficiently without, having them pick their clothes off, for example. It's just a different type of target, different type of security scenario than an airport poses. And here you see the onboard and how everything is really focused on your phone. There are no ticket lines, and she's able to high five, do her meeting, and get back. And her child never knows that she was in Dallas. So these are a few of the organizations that have supported us, state, regional. I don't think we have any national groups on here, but we do have those, and we're very grateful for those. As I mentioned, it's a private effort, but significant public good, public benefit here, and so we're grateful for a lot of these organizations for their support. And this is the shameless plug portion of this morning's conversation. For those of you who have your phones out, feel free to text TRAIN to 52886. We don't sell your information for much. We don't get much for it, but we appreciate any contribution. No, we don't sell it, and we won't wear it out. We want to keep you posted on what we're doing. And if you do engage in social media, so do we. We're everywhere, so we do keep a lot of content up there to keep you posted on what's going on with the project, so you don't have to wait for next year's conference and hope that we get invited back sometime. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, as long as they're easy and I know the answer. I saw your hand first, sir, so I'll start.
I'm really glad you're doing this. I had a couple of questions. You may have said it, but when do you think the first passengers would be riding? And the second, I really would like to go do mass transportation, but, getting from Richardson, how do we get to the train station in Dallas? Hopefully there's mass transportation. And then when you get to Houston, I think you're out on the loop. So how do you get inside the city? So the endpoint connections, I don't know how that's working, and then when's it going to start?
Sure, thanks. Good questions, all of them. Construction's going to start as early as next year. I mentioned the environmental approval. There's also the approval of our safety plan. There are no rules to regulate a high-speed train right now, so those are being developed and reviewed by the FRA as well. If those two processes conclude when they're scheduled to conclude, we'll get to start construction next year. We're expecting about 6 years of construction, and that includes testing and commissioning. We have to run the trains for a full year before we can, put the paying public on there. That's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. I don't want to ride in an airplane that hasn't been, it hasn't checked all of its boxes, and we all wear seat belts and all the rest of it. So these are all good things, and we need to comply with, and will comply with, but it takes time. So about 6 years. So looking at 2026 thereabouts for the first paying passenger. We're selling tickets now, though. I can talk to you afterwards if you want to. We're good for it.
We have our next question here.
And then there was another one about how to get to the station in Dallas and then in Houston. So in Dallas, the station is just south of I-30, just south of the convention center. There's about 60 acres there that's currently Johnson grass and mesquite trees. And that'll be where the high-speed train station is. So it's very close to both the Union Station, Convention Center, and Cedars DART stations. And we're working with DART on how to bring those even closer, not the physical stations, but how to make pedestrian access even more convenient. And then also Amtrak is there as well. The city is looking at a multimodal facility, potentially in one of the old Reunion Arena parking lots, Lot E, there where you would see DART, TRE, and Amtrak all right there with pedestrian access just over I-30 from the high-speed train station. So lots of good stuff happening. And in Richardson, you can take DART down and leave your car here or leave it at home. In Houston, we are actually closer to downtown than Hobby, and Hobby does pretty well. So but we're on the west side of downtown at the intersection of I-10, 610, and 290, and the current Northwest Mall site. So it's another greenfield or kind of a brownfield operation or opportunity rather. We're working with Houston Metro on how we connect with their Northwest Transit Center. That'll be a BRT, bus rapid transit service that Houston is just now implementing, but it'll be an incredible system once it's up and running, and that you'll have really efficient access by highway, by bus rapid transit, and potentially by commuter route in the future to the station area in Houston.
Yes, we have our next question here.
Okay.
Your train can't get here soon enough. I'm really excited. Thank you. But I have two questions. There's a lot of partnerships involved, and what is the length of these partnership agreements? That's my first question, just to make sure it's going to last the 6 years and much longer. And then the other thing you mentioned is that the JR Central owns the IP, and I was wondering how much longer was on the patents.
So the first question on the partnership. So all the partnerships among the various teams involved, it's essentially a division between before financial close, sort of the development phase, as we're getting everything that, for example, the Selene Lane team, everything they need to put together their cost and schedule estimates. So there are certain things that the owner is responsible for delivering, certain agreements with say, TxDOT. We're crossing TxDOT 61 times. So what does that look like? What's the expectation of the contractor? So there are certain things that the owner and other work streams or multiple work streams within the ownership of Texas Central has to deliver to the contractor so they can do their work. So, our partnership right now, it looks as far as financial close, and then the next step would be notice to proceed to construct. But we're already working on that contract, for example. So those partnerships are intended. They're less tied to temporal deadlines as they are to progress on some milestone on the project itself. So the environmental approval or any other financial close on the project really is the key one. That most of these partnerships would be renewed at that point, and the contract that would govern that next phase of our relationship would then be executed, whether it's with the operator for operation, with the design build consortium to build, and the financial advisors for their obligation post financial close and things like that. And then the second question, remind me. The IP. I'm not. That's a good question. I don't know. But it's one of the things that makes doing business in the U.S. really attractive, is that we protect patents, and unfortunately, some of the patents for this technology have not been honored in other countries around the world. So I can't speak to the length of that. I've never gotten that question, but there's sufficient confidence in the length of their patent and our ability to honor it, that they're really committed to the project. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Mine is also about vendors. From a project management perspective, can you speak a little bit to all of what I imagine are lots of challenges from dealing with so many vendors and your underlying process for dealing with competing requirements and how you're managing all of that?
Sure. On one hand, it's a little bit easy because the bulk of the procurement is going to be done by the design build contractor, right? So what we've had to do to date is compete out for those design build services for the program manager, for the operator, for the station contractor, and there have been some other smaller contracts, legal services, marketing, things like that. But the bulk of the procurement opportunities are going to actually lie with the design build contractor, and they, not on this scale, but they do things like this all the time. They go out, they know which subs they want to go with, and we impose on them certain. We have a business workforce opportunity policy, so we're working hard to involve as many minority, women-owned businesses as possible and veteran-owned businesses as possible, and so we pass those requirements on to our contractors, and so they operate within those requirements, but otherwise it's sort of what they always do. So we tend to pass that obligation down a little bit, and a lot of it is being managed by Bechtel, who again is working as an extension of our staff, and they just came off of a mega project and have these processes in place, which was probably the biggest change. Bringing them on was just the protocols, the procedures, the infrastructure that it takes to deliver a project like this is pretty incredible. It's not subtle. It's definitely a change around the office, bringing these processes in place and communicating these requirements to our contractors and holding them accountable, because ultimately, we're held accountable to the public, to policymakers, and others as to how well we perform in the end.
We have our next question here.
Yes, hello. Thank you, sir. I'm over here.
I thought, man, you were throwing your voice and you were good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Will you be able to add stations to this line? Is that possible, or is it fixed once the line is in place?
It's impossible to put a station where there's not track. Is one thing, right? Clearly, and the model in Japan is that they started off with fewer stations and they added stations as they went, as the market warranted. So it's not something that we've looked at, but it's certainly it's technically possible. But the nature of this alignment is there's not really a population cluster outside of Bryan College Station that we are really serving through our Brazos Valley Station that we can see warranting another station. But things change, and I think we would have that flexibility in the future. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Awesome. Hey, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. I think we're going to benefit from this at a great extent. And being from Europe and having a chance to use this in Asia, I think it's really, really good, and people might not understand that yet. A couple of questions. You mentioned Dallas and Houston. Are we trying to expand to some different cities, let's say OKC or any other place in the near future? Number one. And number two, just wanted to understand what kind of train are we planning to use? Is this more like a Shinkansen that goes from Kyoto to Tokyo and different places, or more like what JR uses, like Narita Express, for an example? Just trying to understand what we're using.
Yeah, so we are using the Shinkansen technology. So it's their high speed train that JRC operates from Tokyo to Osaka. Although it'll look other than the shape of it, it'll look entirely different. It'll be a different color scheme, different seats, different seat colors, and different amenities on the inside. But everything that is safety critical to it will be exactly the same as if you've ridden the newest high speed trains in Japan. And then, sorry, your first question.
Expansion to different.
Yes, we get that question a lot about expanding to Austin or Oklahoma City, or we get Amarillo sometimes. The answer is not right now. I mean, we are 100% focused on delivering this project. It is a huge, complicated project, first of its kind, both in terms of the mode, the method of delivery, all that. So we are 100% focused on this project, but we don't think Texans are going to have to wait as long for their second line as they've had to wait for their first one, and that's a good thing. Yeah.
I have a question here.
I have a question. Is it, if you can share, can you share with us any projection you have done, how long it will take you for you to recoup the cost?
No. Part of it is because I don't know, but I will say that the life cycle of the train sets are somewhere in the 25 to 30 year time frame, and so that would be another big investment that would be made into the system. But I can't speak right now into the details of the financing. Yeah. At least not that detail. Yeah.
You have next question here.
So I'm excited that we're having this high-speed train, because I've lived in Europe, and I always wondered, like, why are we so backwards in this area, right? My son was at Austin University, and it used to take him over 5 hours on a coach to come from there to Dallas. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering why we haven't included Austin in here. Not that he's there anymore, but I think that would be great. The other question I have is, I was looking at the development in China. They bought these bullet trains, and within a short time, they pretty much spanned this all across China. So when you go to other countries, you think, well, U.S. is really backward. I mean, even Amtrak, forget the high-speed train. We can easily connect and take an Amtrak and say, okay, I'm going to Austin. Is this in the plan as well, to modify or improve Amtrak as well, so that we have speedy service?
So it's not our plan to modify Amtrak. Amtrak has that's a whole other conversation. Amtrak has some new leadership, and they're taking a different approach and kind of doing more with less and changing their service levels and all that. So, it's easy to come back from a trip to Europe or Asia and think, gosh, why don't we have high-speed trains? And that's the right reaction. That's the right thing to come home and think. But my understanding is that many folks in Europe and Asia are very envious of our freight network. Our freight network is incredible. We move a lot of goods by freight rail, keeps them off our highways. It's energy efficient, it's safe, it's all that. And so, one really good attribute of this project is that it's not on a freight line. This is not Amtrak. This is not even the California system that's gonna share with an Amtrak system for a big chunk of the route. So it's a first do no harm approach when it comes to not impacting our freight system, because it's critical to our economy. And so finding a way to add passenger capacity without decreasing our freight mobility and doing it not at ongoing taxpayer subsidies is I think that's the right mix here. So I think we'll learn a lot from this process. We've already learned a lot from this process. TxDOT and the FRA are studying a passenger rail route from Oklahoma City through North Texas, Austin, San Antonio, went down into Mexico. That environmental document is good for another 4 or so years. So I think a lot of people are looking to see how we're doing, how successful we are, and it may invite other dollars from other people and other ideas into Texas to help meet this need. Because right now the only way to meet a passenger transportation need has been more highways, and we eventually run out of places to throw asphalt. There's a lot more demand for passenger rail, and in some cases more and better Amtrak is the answer. In some cases brand new greenfield projects like ours is the answer, but we're having the conversation, and I think the success so far of this project is helping to advance that conversation, and that it's advancing like it is in Texas, I think is a really good thing.
Okay, question over here.
Thank you very much for this wonderful project. We are flying frequently to Europe. Some airlines have flights from Houston and driving to Houston and parking the car there for 10 days. It's a big headache. This idea is wonderful. I don't know how I will go from the station to the airport, but probably there is a way, you know it. Waiting to get the microphone, parts of my questions were already answered. So I will repeat some of them. So I have one question, one comment, and another question. So first question, there are so many billions to be recovered, and also some profit to be made. In your management plan, what is the timeline to recover that? You answered partially, and at this investment, if you believe the tickets will be affordable for us, not for the businesses. This is the first question. Then the impolite comment is that we have an experience with private investment with Highway 121. When Highway 121 was built, I used to make 30 minutes to go from my house to the airport, and it costed 45 cents for the first section. Now people are flocking here from California and from other states. There are jobs in Texas. We drive bumper to bumper. We make 2 hours to go to the airport at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the price is only $2.20 or 40 cents. It is increased every month because people use this. It will be the same pattern with this project, not on the taxpayer money. I am sorry. So the first question was if the tickets will be affordable for us. The last was, you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think I can respond to the comment and answer your question. So I mentioned earlier the 68 one-way trips a day. Those have 400 seats per train set. So we're going to have more seating capacity going back and forth than any of the airlines will, or do today at least, right? That could always change. So we'll have a lot of capacity, and we know we have to compete on price. We're going to win on travel experience. It's stress-free. Your time is yours to use as you wish. The reliability we're going to win on. It's going to leave on schedule, arrive on schedule. You can plan on it. And the overall experience is going to be better because we're building 3 brand new stations from scratch with best in class everything, integration to TNCs like Uber and Lyft, to transit where we can, and everything. Everything's going to be integrated. The experience is going to be incredible. But if we charge $1,000 a ticket, it's going to be a museum piece, right? So we've got to compete on price as well, knowing that most of our riders are going to come out of their cars, and we've also got to induce new riders, people that aren't traveling but would if the experience were more pleasant, cheaper, more accessible. So we're looking at the entirety of the passenger experience from the moment you exit your DART train or the moment you exit the freeway to get to the station. Your passenger experience begins right there. So as we're designing the station itself, working with the city on redesigning some of the access roads to the station, everything the passenger sees, how they interact with the service in its entirety, including the price of the ticket, because everyone's going to ride it once, right? Everyone will ride it once. We want you to come back twice, 3 times. We want that to be your preferred mode of travel, and you just aren't going to do it if it's cost prohibitive or if it's not reliable or perceived to be unsafe. So we've got to fill those seats. It's hard to make money off of an empty seat, and to do that, we've got to compete on price, and we have the capacity to do that.
We have our next question here.
So is the project partnering with any telecom service providers like Verizon, AT&T for using their 5G or IoT technologies?
We are. I mentioned NEC. They're providing some of the signaling services and the cab communications services. Some of that infrastructure and some of the services involved in that, both the communication from the driver back to the control center and passenger Wi-Fi, and then some of the other communications that we're installing. We are looking at some partnerships, and so yes, I can't speak to those, but they are ongoing and some pretty exciting things going on there. More to come. Yeah.
We have our next question.
So I had a question about the timing. You said 90-minute trip.
Mm-hmm.
But door to door, that's going to be different. I have to drive from Frisco to I-30. That can be an hour or more.
Right.
And then from the destination station to wherever I'm going, which Houston traffic, it can be days to get there. So, and then the cost, right? By the time I get to I-30 through the station onto the train, I can be an hour south of Dallas. So that total time is what I'm looking at.
Sure.
And if it's 4.5 hours for me to drive from Frisco to Houston, but it's 3.5 when you include all the other stuff to ride a 90-minute train, that's different. And I have to rent a car.
Or take an Uber or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. We looked at that, and I alluded earlier to looking at where trips begin and where they end. And the way we did that is you can go out and you can buy Bluetooth data. It's all anonymous. You don't know. I don't know that it's your Bluetooth data, but I know that it's Bluetooth data and it's from cell phones, right? Lots of marketers and others use this. And what we can tell, and there's some interesting reports on our website. I'm happy to send you the link. It's on our website if you want to look at it. But we looked at where these trips begin and where most trips end. And we looked, because very few people right now live at Northwest Mall, and very few people live in that field on the railroad tracks south of Dallas or in south of downtown. So it really matters how you get there and how you get to where you're going once you're there. And so we looked at where trips begin, and we ran all that, figuring in, calculating in anticipated congestion within the metro areas over the next 15 years. And we calculated the time of the trip, comparing travel by car, you just drive straight from Frisco down, or by air, you drive from Frisco to DFW or Love, and you fly down, then you go, or to the train station. And we looked, and I believe it was 90% of travelers would save a significant amount of time. I think it was at least an hour. And a lot of that is due to relative to airplanes, you have to get there early. You don't have to do that with trains. The security experience is very different. Airports tend to be surrounded by runways, and so everything that where you'd want to park and everything else tends to be far away. Whereas a train station, you're parking underneath or right immediately adjacent to that train station. So your travel time from your car to the platform to your train is very, very short. And compared to driving, I don't know that there are any major plans to expand I-45 right now, but there's no alternative route. And often there's an accident, there's construction, and when there is, that is a parking lot. So it comes back to that reliability, dependability issue. If you have to be in Houston Saturday night and you leave Saturday morning, that's probably fine. But you're going to get there really early. There's some significant inefficiencies there, and there's some risk there. I mean, I drive to Houston more than I want because I mentioned before I live in Fort Worth, and so I do that same calculus. Do I drive an hour to left field and then fly? It's shorter for me to drive, so I just drive. But often I'm late, or I have to leave incredibly early to allow for the inevitable, almost inevitable traffic accident or construction. So what we're doing is eliminating that risk, inserting reliability, dependability, and that time behind the wheel is not productive time. You can make phone calls, but it's really inadvisable to use your laptop. And so we're giving that time back to you. So it's not just, you're not looking at it purely as travel time, but you're not losing a half of a work day. And it's really hard to do it down and back in Houston in the same day, like maybe you can to Austin. You spent 9 hours in the car and you haven't had your meeting yet. We're making that possible to Houston as well, bringing that 4.5 down to, an hour and a half each way.
On the project, I mean, as a civil engineer, we usually finish the infrastructure, and then operation giving to mechanical engineer or any other. My question is, the system is made of Japan, right? But what about the train? Inside the train, the chair, after that broke. Is it going to be made of Japan or is it going to be made of USA? The second is like, you're talking about the economic impact, like 35 billion on this road. What about the economic loss in the I-45 with a smaller city that have the revenue from the speed trap for the car? Mm-hmm. Is there any other survey for that? Thank you.
Right. So first on where the train's being made, the current plan is for the train to be largely manufactured in Japan, shipped over, and then a final assembly would be in the U.S. at one of our train maintenance facilities, either in Dallas or Houston. So final assembly, and everything that's safety critical needs to fall into that bucket, probably manufactured in Japan and brought over here. Anything like the seats and things like that, there's a possibility for that to be sourced locally, but we're still working through all that and how that's going to work. In all likelihood, that would also be manufactured in Japan and then brought over. In terms of the total cost of the project, the trains are it's a relatively small percentage of the overall cost of the project. The vast majority, 90% or more of the project's cost is being spent in Texas labor, Texas materials, U.S. materials. But so that's more of a safety issue than anything else. And in terms of the adverse impacts on, the Buc-ee's I mentioned or the other businesses along I-45, we're adding 1,200 some odd people a day to Texas, and 80-something%, I think, are inside that triangle. So the pie is getting bigger, and there are going to be plenty of people that are on I-45. I don't think we're going to have to worry about a decline in traffic on I-45. I would love to have that problem. I would love to have, the problem where our trains are really full, but we're going to have full trains, and there's going to be plenty of people on I-45. We're just growing so much, and there are fewer and fewer places for Houston to grow, and it's growing north and it's growing west.
We have next question here. Sorry, after this.
A question for you about safety. So for all of us who have been back and forth between Dallas and Houston, and we know what that traffic is like, if there's an emergency situation on the train somewhere along the way, what contingency plans do you have to get people off the train, especially it being elevated so high? And what conversations have you had, if you've had them, with emergency services and hospital systems to then accommodate a crash or a security issue that then has people's lives at stake there?
Sure. No. There's a lot. We're designing the civil infrastructure now, and so what we're doing is addressing it through civil infrastructure and then designing our plans and policies around that. So civil infrastructure-wise, every 2.5 miles at least, there will be an emergency staging area where there will be, if it's on a viaducted, so an elevated portion, there will be a staircase access, and then enough room for, I think it's 2 fire trucks, 3 police cars, 2 ambulances, and then a place for 400 people to take refuge. And there'll be power and water and shelter. So that's every 2.5 2.5 miles, you have one of those sites, so that if a train is stranded, if there's an incident on board the train or an incident ahead of the train, there's a place to evacuate people. And then how you get people off the train depends on what may have happened aboard the train. If it still has power, the trains do have batteries on board. So in most cases, the train will be able to make it a pretty far distance under battery power, either to the next passenger station or to the next emergency shelter area. And then I mentioned the training and equipment for first responders. This is where that equipment comes into play. Some of that equipment includes how do you access a viaducted section for emergency access? How do you get first responders up there? You have to design the viaducts, the elevated viaducts, so there's a walking path for those first responders and to get people off the train. If someone is, say, had a heart attack on the train or something like that, how do you get that person off? So we're designing all those policies and procedures now, and they have to comply with federal statute. And then we have to conduct training on an ongoing basis for local first responders. And we've started meeting with first responders a little bit. Some of the rural fire departments, for example, and then we've met with all the law enforcement agencies in Dallas County and Harris County. They have overlapping jurisdiction in some of the counties as well. So that's all coming together well ahead of time because we're still well ahead, operation. Those are all concerns about operations. We also have 7 years or 6 years of construction to think about. So we're putting together our plans for the construction phase as well. A lot of that's going to be self-contained, where each construction crew will have a paramedic on hand, and we'll be able to handle most all of the construction-related incidents self-contained, at least stabilize a person, and then get them to the closest trauma center. So we're putting policies in place for that as well, and that's part of our plan. But it's something that's required by statute, and we'll be unrolling that and working on that and getting input from first responders over the next few years before operation starts.
Here.
Hello, we have a question here at this table. This young man's been waiting for
this
15 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. There you go.
Thank you. As somebody who travels a lot, I can really appreciate the ability for getting between Dallas and Houston. Having said that, I've been in Texas for over 20 years, and Texans, they really love their land. They don't like to give up a lot of that land. And my question to you is, has there been any findings for eminent domain, or are you seeking eminent domain in any areas? Because usually you have to have some type of court finding or subject to that. And have you guys taken that on, and have you even identified areas where you might need that?
Sure. So eminent domain is an authority or a right that the Texas legislature gave to railroads in the late 1800s. And that's very clear in statute that railroads have that authority, and it's different from how a city or the state would use eminent domain. It has to be for a railroad purpose. It's going to be a certain width. I can't go condemn for Travis Kelly, Texas. It has to be railroad purpose. There is organized opposition to the project, as many of y'all may know, and the main contention is that, well, are you a railroad? That's the issue that's being litigated, and so far it's being done in the context of surveys. We go on people's property with their permission to conduct various surveys, either for the environmental review or so we can do meets and bounds, so we can know where their property is to make them an offer. And so some of that authority has been challenged in the context of, are you a railroad? So that's really where this is. We have not used eminent domain or tried to use eminent domain. That is the most expensive and time-consuming way to purchase property, and it's not the way we want to do it. We'd much rather pay the landowner than pay their attorney, and that's been our approach, and that's the approach with the options agreements that we've been using, and that's that process is working when we're able to sit down and have a conversation with the landowner and we're given an opportunity to respond to their concerns. The process works. We don't want to have to go through condemnation. It's not pleasant or cheap or quick for either party, and our right to use that authority, we believe it's very clear in statute and in practice, and it is being litigated in the context of survey access.
Okay, here.
Travis, thank you so much for very, very inspiring presentation. Question I've had over the years, even prior to high-speed rail, is around risk management and financial exposure, if you will, which begs the question of how much we have invested in with regard to high-speed rail systems, the kinds of positive train control networks that we're not doing very well with at regular passenger train speeds, okay, and investment and so forth. I'm wondering basically with the high speed at a much higher speed and so forth, what's been built into the system to ensure safety on the transport, on the trans route, if you will. As I mentioned, what we're doing in the States currently, I don't know if it's budget or what have you, but I think only maybe about 15 to 20% of the rail systems and also the trains and so forth have that positive train control speed control thing. Is anything being done differently with regard to the high speed?
Quite a bit, yes. And for those that don't know, positive train control is it's a general term for a group of systems that allow the track infrastructure to talk to the train, to talk to a central control center, so everyone knows where the train is, and the train can actually be controlled remotely if the driver is trying to exceed the speed restrictions, or if there's a health situation, the driver isn't responding. And it's believed that if PTC had been installed on some of these lines around the country prior to a lot of these incidents, would have horrible, tragic crashes and derailments would have been prevented. For the high-speed train system, we have what's called automatic train control. It's sort of PTC plus. So it complies with the requirements of positive train control that the federal government now requires, but it's even more advanced. There's still a driver in the train, and the driver does have control, but the driver can lose control. I mean, the central control center can take over control from the driver, and unlike PTC, ATC is active in the train yards where the train is going very, very slowly. Most collisions, most derailments happen at 30 miles an hour or less, and so ATC will control the train from 0 miles an hour on up. Which is additional. There are a lot of redundancies built into this system, and from a safety standpoint, and that's one of them. And it's obviously something that, as we go out and look for capital, folks that aren't accustomed to investing in trains, they want to make sure that they're not going to lose their investment, and belt and suspenders is kind of the approach. And that's why you see this safety record in Japan over the last 54 years, is all these redundancies, both in the design of the system and the operation of the system. And I could speak to more of those, but on the signaling system, it's incredibly sophisticated, and the feedback we've received from the FRA to date is that they're really impressed with how it works. And it'll be a completely isolated system. No other passenger technology, no other freight technology will operate on this infrastructure. So it removes any risk of some other system, some other train interfering with the operation. The operation of this train will be just that, the operation of the high-speed train on that track.
Yeah, so I had a couple of questions very similar to some of the other questions around safety. You had some numbers of the number of years the train has gone within Japan with no issues, no accidents or anything. So different countries have different regulations with regards to safety. So how do you see the safety here compared to the safety records that they've had in Japan, where it's very much a mass transit country, and in Texas it's relatively new? My second question is, why Texas? Is it because you could go into green fields and not compete with Amtrak's? Because if you look at both the East Coast and the West Coast, they are more used to mass transit, and so you wouldn't have a high learning curve for the passenger groups.
Yep. So first, on the safety standards, fortunately,
passenger rail safety lies with the federal government, not the state government. And so the federal government has a great deal of experience regulating passenger rail. They don't regulate high-speed rail just because there's no high-speed rail here. And so we're working with the FRA on developing those standards that they will use, and those rules and regulations that they will use on an ongoing basis to regulate our operations. And it's, you know, if you look at the table of contents for the rule for, say, even BNSF and the table of contents for our system, many of those chapters have the same title. You know, how long does a driver have to rest between shifts? How fast can you go on what kind of track? How do you maintain the track? You know, how are the seats affixed to the floor of the train car? A lot of these are, you're asking the same questions. We're giving you different answers, and we're backing those answers up with 54 years of operating experience in Japan. And rather than trying to make the train system fit into an existing regulation, the FRA is developing an entirely new rule that will only apply to this system. It's called a rule of particular applicability. So we're going to be able to incorporate all the best practices, both from the construction of the train, but also the maintenance of the train and the operation of the train, and all of that will be regulated by the FRA, and these rules are developing now. So it'll be copy and paste everything that's safety critical, from the infrastructure to the soft knowledge on the train, the operation and maintenance, copy and paste over here, regulated the same way by the FRA. And I was gonna not forget that second question, but I want. Oh, why Texas? So before this company was set up, we looked at 97 city pairs across the country, looking at where do you have the highest ridership and the lowest construction cost. Obviously in California, you have really high ridership, but they're having to build a tunnel for a high-speed train through an active fault. A high-speed train tunnel through an active fault. That one part of that system costs more than the entire project in Texas. Now, that doesn't mean that the ridership isn't there, that system doesn't make sense. It just means that it's incredibly expensive, and it probably won't be able to be developed in the same development model that we're using in Texas. In the Northeast Corridor, it's the only place where Amtrak actually owns its infrastructure, but it's, 12 states in the Northeast Corridor, so that's 24 senators. It's a lot of congestion, and it's really expensive to build there, so your capital cost is incredibly high, and you are competing with Amtrak and other regional railroads. In Texas, you have a greenfield opportunity. There's 600 feet of elevation change between Dallas and Houston. It's all one state, so you're not dealing with all the cross-state issues, and you're not crossing any major rivers, no tunnels. So from a civil construction standpoint, the construction cost was fairly low, and you have the 4th and 6th largest metro areas in the country not connected by passenger rail. So we saw an incredible opportunity here, and that's why Texas. Yeah.
We have next question here.
Very interesting presentation, sir. I was curious about, we've talked a lot about vision the last couple of days, and was it a company or a person that came up with the original vision to put trains here in high-speed trains in North Texas?
Yes, it was some people, and there was a gentleman named Yoshiyuki Kasai. He's the chairman emeritus of JR Central, and he led the privatization of JR Central. It was Japan National Railway. JR Central said, you know what, give us all the debt for the entire construction of high-speed and freight networks in Japan. Give us all the debt. We'll pay down all the debt, but we want to operate between Tokyo and Osaka, the most heavily trafficked train corridor in the world. And he led that, and he led that whole initiative. And it was after that became a private company that he really focused on R&D, on optimizing the service, on making the trains better and faster and quieter and lighter, more fuel efficient and all that, and energy efficient. And after 10 or 12 years of that R&D, he determined, you know what, these trains are ready for prime time. We want to take this show on the road and look for other places to deploy this technology. And he partnered with another person who's still on our board now, Richard Lawless, and they initiated those first studies to look at if there was a market in the U.S. because we honor patents and things like that. And we have no real high-speed rail anywhere in the country. They conducted those first studies to look for the city pair that might be ripe for a private sector deployment of high-speed trains. And this was all before Obama Rail. This was before there was any notion that there could be any kind of grant money available for high-speed rail. This was initially contemplated from its very beginning as a purely private sector play to bring high-speed trains to the U.S.
I had one other question. Just in terms of simple payback, have y'all calculated that, or do you know that?
We have calculated it, and it is known. It is not known by me. I mentioned those folks in fancy suits somewhere in Manhattan. There are folks working every day all over the world, frankly, on financing this project. It's seen as an incredible opportunity, a first of its kind opportunity in the U.S. So it's garnered a lot of attention, and we're working on that communication now with those folks. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Travis. That was great. We'd like to present you with this token of appreciation. It is a large Texas-sized cutting board. I saw on Pinterest last night where you can attach wheels to it and build your first prototype of your high-speed until you get it done. Thank you very much. Thank you, Travis. Okay, great. Another quick break and then on to our breakout sessions. And we'll see you back here later for lunch.